Shabbat Shalom. Good morning, everyone. I am Rabbi Jenny Greenspan here for Congregation Beth-El for our weekly Shabbat morning Torah Talk. And it'll be good to see you all this morning as we look at Parshat Ki Tetzei. Right in the heart of Deuteronomy, Ki Tetzei has the distinction of being the Torah portion with the most laws, the most rules, values given. And our bar mitzvah will be speaking about that a little bit later. So I do encourage you to join us for our 10 a.m. service and hear from our bar mitzvah on that. And for now, I'll say Shabbat Shalom and welcome, and look forward to our learning together today. So we'll jump on in. As usual, if you would like to pull a copy of the Etz Chaim Chumash, we do have a PDF of it available on our website. Just go to bez613.org, select worship, and then Shabbat, and scroll down to the resources toward the bottom of that page where you will see the link to Etz Chaim. You can, of course, join me in a physical copy of an Etz Chaim Chumash or any other Chumash you might have on hand. And I will today be looking at one of the many laws in this Torah portion. And we will go from there. I'm trying to see if I can. I see that I have at least one comment, but for whatever reason it is not showing, so I apologize if I am seeming to miss you. But I'll say Shabbat Shalom and welcome. There they are. Now they're coming in. Shabbat Shalom. Good morning to Carol Steinfeld and to Marty Lip, to Marcia and Bruce Sclair, and Shabbat Shalom to Jim. No worries on missing last week. That's why it's freely available. We won't take down the recording that Facebook makes, so you can always join later. I know we moved the time around, so Shabbat Shalom and welcome. So glad I can now see that who's joining me as we jump in to learn a little bit from this morning's Torah portion. We'll go to Deuteronomy chapter 22, verse 1. So if you were in the Etz Chaim Chumash, that's on page 1115. If you're using a different Chumash, it's Deuteronomy chapter 22, verse 1. Good morning, Shabbat Shalom to Deborah Taylor McGee as well. And let's jump in. And Jody Zucker too. So good morning and happy to see everybody. So chapter 22, verse 1. Lo tir'eh et shor achicha, or et sev nidachim, v'hit alamta mehem. Sev tishivem le'achicha. So I want to focus on that one word that I sort of emphasized, v'hit alamta. If you see your fellow's ox or sheep gone astray, do not ignore it. You must take it back to your fellow. If you find your neighbor's animal, or really, as our rabbis will expand it, any lost object, you may not ignore it. Do not ignore is the English. V'hit alamta is the Hebrew word I want us to look at. If you are in the Etz Chaim Chumash, it's in the second line of that section of Hebrew, the third word in. And if you are familiar with Hebrew, I'm going to go a little bit on grammar today. If you're familiar with Hebrew, most verbs are made up of a three-letter root. In this case, ayin, lamed, mem, that are then housed in binyanim, they're called buildings, and through those conjugations show you anything from the tense, the past, the present, the future, to the gender or to the person, first person, second person, and so forth. And the binyanim will also show you emphasis, or sometimes give you a little hint as to how a root is being used. This particular binyan, heat, that begins with that heat phrase, usually refers to a reflexive verb, something one does to oneself. If you use the root for to dress in this particular binyan, you mean you're dressing yourself rather than getting a child dressed, for example. So it's a little mini grammar lesson to jump into this word, v'hit alamta, or to ignore. You should not ignore, because de lo is do not is at the beginning of our verse. Do not ignore. So I want us to look at that root, ayin lamed mem. It might actually be a very familiar root to many of us for when we say a bracha, a blessing. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech ha'olam. Olam, or world, universe, and all is in that same root. But so it's interesting here that it ends up meaning ignore. So I want to look at how. The root actually means, the root is a different verse, in a different form of the verb, in the nif'al, in the kind of somewhat passive, means to vanish or to disappear. If you do in the causative, it means to make something disappear. And somehow here, in the reflexive, it ends up meaning to ignore. I want to think about how does the same shoresh, the same root that can mean all of the world, also mean to disappear and to mean to ignore. I want to look at how those three things work together a little bit. Because this verse is saying, do not, if you see your fellow's ox or sheep gone astray, do not disappear it to yourself, is really what the Hebrew of ignore is getting at. You must take it back to your fellow. I think that that is teaching us something very important. Hidden in the very grammar of the language of our Torah is hidden a very important lesson. And that is, to ignore something is not actually to make the problem go away. The problem does not disappear. The lost animal that needs attention and needs to be cared for and needs to be returned to its owner doesn't go away. When you ignore something, you disappear it only to yourself. The problem doesn't disappear, you disappear it to yourself, which in truth ends up meaning to the entire world, you don't disappear the problem, you disappear yourself as a solution. You make the problem continue to exist in a world where problems are constantly ignored and allowed to be treated as though if we just don't look, they'll go away. We know that our world does not work that way. We know that pretending that a problem doesn't exist does not make the problem go away for everyone else. In truth, it makes us go away as a possible solution. There's so many things that we could be paying better attention to in our world, ways that we could be better shaping our world and caring for our world. And if we ignore them, we don't make the problems go away. We don't make the problems our environment is facing go away. We don't make the problems that of constantly spreading COVID go away. We don't make the problem go away. We simply end up making ourselves no longer an option for a solution. So right here, not only is this verse calling us to not disappear ourselves, to not make us useless as a way to solve a problem, and tells us we cannot ignore our neighbor's lost animal, but we are reminded that every time we are tempted to ignore something, we're actually doing something to ourselves. When we are hoping to ignore, in truth, we are taking ourselves away. We are not actually making the problem go away. The problem isn't what disappears. This is a reflexive verb. We are what disappears as a solution. So I hope that as we go forward, as we hear a little bit from our bar mitzvah later on about the draw of all of the rules given and the laws given in this Torah portion, that we also remember that we are part of the solutions of the problems of our world. And I hope that we do not ignore them, that we do not make ourselves go away, that we do not disappear ourselves as an option to solve the problems, but rather we open our eyes, we see our neighbor's problem. We, instead of ignoring it, we respond and we help one another. And so I hope we have a week of helping one another. Please join us on the Bima at 10 a.m. Join us in the sanctuary at 10 a.m. either in person or on our live stream as we're celebrating the bar mitzvah today of Eli Eisen, and I hope I will get to see you there. So Shabbat Shalom, and welcome also to those who gathered in a few moments after I gave my first round of greetings. Shabbat Shalom. I do see you, to Jim Roth, to Cheryl Toof, and to Michael Kahn and Peter Trahonar Mayer. So Shabbat Shalom. So good to see all of you, and may we all open our eyes and open our hearts, and not ignore the problems of the world, but do what little bits that we can to help return all that is lost to where it belongs. So Shabbat Shalom. Thank you so much for joining me.